American Top 40.
You know, for the past few years, Englishman Robert Palmer has been receiving rave reviews and predictions of superstardom from rock critics in this country and in Great Britain. This week, he gets the people's vote as he debuts with his first Top 40 hit. At number 39, Robert Palmer and Every Kind of People.
Casey's Coast to Coast.
This is Gordon Elliott, sitting in for Casey Kasem on American Top 40. Now, the hit by that nervy kid who was offered his first recording contract and asked for the sky. His name was Robert Palmer, and for years in his native England, he'd played guitar in a long string of second-rate bands, wrote songs that were never published, and was slowly going nowhere. So one day, Robert tried something to change his life around. He put together a tape of his best stuff and sent it off to Island Records president Chris Blackwell. Blackwell liked the tape and invited Robert to come in and talk about a recording contract. So Robert went down to Island Records, was ushered into Blackwell's plush office and offered a chair. Then the record mogul looked across his polished mahogany desk at this musician who hadn't accomplished anything yet and asked, "What exactly do you want?" And without blinking an eye, Robert Palmer said, "Everything. I want to move to Los Angeles. I want these and those musicians, this producer, that studio. I need unlimited time and almost unlimited finance. Also, I cannot work without freedom, total independence." Cheeky, but Island Records president Chris Blackwell didn't blink an eye either. He said fine, and that's how Robert Palmer's life changed around from being a musician to being a recording artist. His second Top 40 hit moves up 2 notches this week to 19. Bad Case of Loving You.
American Top 40.
I'm Shadoe Stevens on American Top 40. Here's a man who says sometimes he feels like a bad tuba player. That's what he says. You see, sometimes people call Robert Palmer Bob Palmer. It doesn't bug him, but he says Bob Palmer sounds like an old overweight man who plays a really bad tuba. Well, here's the sophisticated, slick Robert Palmer, nowhere near a tuba, on Simply Irresistible.
American Top 40.
And talking about love bites, here's a man who says his life's a lot like a vampire's. He's Robert Palmer, and he doesn't go around biting people on the neck, at least I don't think he does. But he does say that he makes Count Dracula look like a morning person. Most of the time, when he can, Palmer sleeps during the day. Not in a coffin, though, and he works at night, in the studio, on stage, in concert. He just says that's the way he works the best.
Casey's Top 40.
You're listening to CT40, coming to you from Hollywood. Well, climbing 4 notches to number 15 is a song that was given to Rod Stewart by his friend Robert Palmer. It was a gift. It was originally written for Robert, but he told Rod, quote, "I don't like to do ballads, and this one cries out for you to do it." And Rod did it all right. This week he moves up 4 notches to number 15 with My Heart Can't Tell You No.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. These are the week's biggest hits from 40 to number 1, and we're counting them down. Well, now we're up to the latest hit for a star who grew up on the tiny Mediterranean island of Malta. He owned albums by just 3 singers, and listening to them over and over and over again gave him his sound. The singer is Robert Palmer, and he was born in Yorkshire, England, but he didn't grow up there. His father was a British naval officer, and soon after Robert was born, Dad was transferred to the island of Malta, a former British colony in the Mediterranean just south of Italy. Malta's a tiny place, very isolated, and it was a strange place for young Robert to grow up. He remembers that for some reason, Johnny Weissmuller, the actor who played Tarzan in the movies, had a home there. And Weissmuller, who'd also won 5 gold medals in the Olympics for swimming, taught Robert to swim when the boy was just 3. Robert also remembers that he had only a small handful of albums to listen to, and they were by 3 artists, Otis Redding, James Brown, and Marvin Gaye. Robert loved music, and he played those 3 albums over and over again, learning the lyrics and imitating the styles. He says it's a lucky thing the singers he listened to were so good, because it's their styles that shaped his. Robert told us, quote, "It got to a point where I could sing every word on every one of those albums. I could make every sound James Brown makes and soften my voice like Marvin Gaye did. I keep trying to sound like myself, but I always hear some of them in my voice." Well, these days we're all getting a chance to hear a bit of Marvin Gaye and Robert Palmer's voice, because Robert's 8th Top 40 hit is a medley of 2 songs Marvin Gaye made famous.
The hits from coast to coast.
And this next artist may be the best dressed man in music. With those custom-cut Italian suits and shoes, hair not out of place, who could argue? Robert Palmer is one dashing guy. And he told AT40 he's not a Johnny-come-lately to fashion finesse.
When I was, say, 5 or 6, my parents used to take me to all these formal parties with them in the Mediterranean, in Malta. They were naval parties from all over the world, and I just thought the naval uniforms looked swell, particularly the Italian ones. And it goes further than that. I just like craftsmanship in anything, you know, whether it be furniture, clothes, music, movies. So if I see something that's really well made and not going to be out of style in 6 months, then it's worth spending $500 on a suit. Hi, this is Robert Palmer. Don't touch that dial. There's a ton of great music still to come when American Top 40 continues.
I think it's safe to say that most of us will never get a chance to record our own versions of songs by our favorite singers, especially those of us who couldn't carry a tune in a bag. But if you are a singer, then you've got a shot. But it must be intimidating to try and redo a hit by one of your inspirations. Recently, AT40 brought that up when we talked to English singer Robert Palmer. He has a big hit double remake with 2 songs originally cut by his inspiration, Marvin Gaye. That hits at number 17 this week, and here's what Robert had to say about it.
I've never even sung Marvin Gaye songs, like I heard it through the grapevine. I guess there was something sacrosanct about it, or it may be that they're very, very difficult to sing, both technically and emotionally. There's a lot of intensity to them. So when I did attempt it, it was like, okay, let's see what happens. And the I Want You song, I'd made a note of wanting to do it a long time ago, 5 years ago. And the other song, when I mentioned it to my manager that I wanted to cut that, his favourite was Mercy Me, and I thought, well, I can stick them together. And the juxtaposition of the ecology and the bedroom, I thought was kind of neat.
Casey's biggest hits.
4 years ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was Simply Irresistible by a globe-trotting Englishman who every day crossed the Alps from Switzerland to Italy to record it. Talk about living an international lifestyle. But then this singer and songwriter has always been a world traveler. Even though he was born in England, he grew up on the Mediterranean island of Malta. He did his early recording in New York, then moved to Nassau in the Bahamas, where he now makes his home. But to record this big hit, he decided to work at a studio in Milan, Italy. But he didn't want to stay there, so he rented a house on Lake Lugano in Switzerland, and every day he commuted nearly 200 miles across the Alps. That gave him lots of time to listen to the songs that he was working on. 4 years ago this week, one of those songs was one of the biggest hits in the USA.
Casey's biggest hits.
7 years ago this week, back in 1986, one of the biggest hits in the USA was Addicted to Love by a stylish Englishman who was sung dressed in tie and jacket with eccentric avant-garde bands like Dada, Vinegar Joe, and Mandrake Paddle Steamer. The musicians around him would be dressed in all sorts of crazy outfits, stuff that could only be worn on stage. But this singer decided early on that the one way to be truly different was to dress really well. And even when he went solo, he continued to wear high-fashion, custom-made Giorgio Armani and Hugo Boss suits, the sort of GQ fashions he wore in the stylish video for one of the biggest hits in the USA 7 years ago this week. Here's clothes addict Robert Palmer with Addicted to Love.
America's top hits.
15 years ago this week, one of the top hits in the USA was by The Power Station, a band who said their intention was to produce one album and one album only, and that's exactly what they did. It was a notion that singer Robert Palmer came up with. He loved the idea of putting out a single album that was as good as it could be and never have to worry about a follow-up. Well, for this one-shot project, he joined up with guitarist John Taylor and bass player Andy Taylor of Duran Duran and drummer Tony Thompson of Chic. The album, titled The Power Station, did well. It reached the top 10. But aside from a tour afterwards, that was it for The Power Station, except for a brief reunion in 1997 and for one of the top hits in the USA 15 years ago this week. Here's The Power Station with Get It On.
Counting down the hits with Casey Kasem.